dos, uno, let's boogie. All right, so commonly students who are taking statistics may run into this problem where they might have to create some questions for maybe projects or assignments or something of that nature. And they might run into the problem of trying to figure out what is the variable that they're measuring based on the study that they're doing. And then what are actually the data values or the entire data set that that variable can take on. So I want to try to give a few examples to explain the difference between the two and allow, I guess, anybody who's studying this topic to see it maybe a little bit more clearly through examples. So let's imagine, okay, so here is my first example that I wanted to do a study on. Let's say I was doing an experiment. So let's say I took the athletes, let's say in a particular club, and I asked them to run, let's say at 80%. And what I was trying to measure is I was trying to measure how long does it take before the athlete, let's say, reaches 60% of their maximum heart rate. All right, so that's the question. So how long does it take for an athlete to reach, say, 60% of their maximum heart rate while running at 80% of a maximum? So in that particular case, what I would have is I would have a variable that I'm measuring. Now, what am I measuring? I'm measuring how long does it take. So my variable is time. So that's my variable. So my time, and we know that we can designate time with a t. But what is this data values, right? So the data values are the entire data set that your variable can take on. So this particular t, okay, is going to take on, okay, so some values within a set. Now, what is that set? Well, if you want to be able to reach 60%, so obviously time cannot be less than 0, all right? So time is going to be definitely greater than 0. Now, unless they've already at that 60% of heart rate, then, I guess I can count as my data set. So t, all right, so I'm going to take my t, and I'm going to say that t is going to be greater, okay, or equal to 0. And now t, of course, is also a real number. Okay, so it can take on real numbers. It's going to be any value which is greater or equal to 0, and it's going to be real because t is a continuous variable. So that's what we have. It's not a discrete variable. All right. Now for my t, okay, I will be able to measure it. So now I can measure it in seconds, I can measure it in minutes or in hours and so on. That doesn't matter, okay, in terms of the unit. But in any case, this particular time and your data set is going to be any number which is equal or greater than 0. And your variable is time t. So this is one particular example where you can actually distinguish between variable and then all the data values, right? The entire data set that variable can take on. Okay, so this is for a quantitative, question or quantitative study. Now, what if you're doing a qualitative study? Okay, so let's say the qualitative study, I smile because most of the time I'm wearing white t-shirts. So I have a hoodie at the moment. But so let's imagine that I had a different question. So let's say, I wanted to figure out the favorite colors of students. All right. Okay, so what is your favorite color of a t-shirt? And then, I was doing a study on that, maybe by a survey or something like that. So in this case, obviously my variable is different. Okay, so my variable in this case is going to be, okay, color of the t-shirt. So that's my variable. So color of t-shirt. Now, in terms of the data set or the data values, so those ones are basically all the different, okay, values that the t-shirt can take on, which basically means any color possible, right? because I don't know what students actually like. I mean, and especially now there's so many different mixtures, okay? So let's designate the variable as simply a C, all right, which is going to stand for color, okay, of a t-shirt. Let's say like that. So now, what is the data set within here? So now this epsilon, and I put the epsilons here, just means it belongs to. So it is, okay, so basically any color. Okay, so any possible color. So you can do that, and that is your set. So I'm putting it inside of the squiggly brackets. Now you can list the colors, of course, if maybe you've restricted it to something. But if you're really asking, or let's say if I'm asking what your favorite color is, then there's basically any color, right, that they can pick. So this is your data set. And these are the values that it can take on. Now in the previous question, this was your data set that you had, and then the values that it could take on. So you have to be kind of mindful, right, in terms of the variables that you have and then the data set that you might carry. And it might change, okay, depending on your particular variable that you are measuring. Okay, so that will be, there might be minimums or they might be maximums. So you can do a study on the temperature. So let's say the temperatures, okay, over the last 365 days, what were the maximum temperatures within a particular day? And if you're measuring temperatures, and of course it can be somewhere wherever you are. I don't know, Miami, New York, okay, somewhere in the Alaska or something like that. Okay, you can pick a city or a state or a province or a country, right? So in those cases, if you were measuring the temperature, your variable would have been temperature. And now, what does temperature take on, right? What are all the maximum values that it can take on? Now, obviously, in this case, there is a minimum, right? But it would be negative if you are maybe somewhere up north. Now, it will depend, okay? If you're somewhere closer to the equator, you may not have negative temperatures at all, or the probability might be low. But in any case, okay, in terms of your variable, okay, in terms of temperatures, you might say T, okay, which is your temperature. That's your variable. And what does it belong to? And now, within this case, now it's also continuous, right? That it can take on numerous things. So, T within here would have been a real number, but it is being restricted. So it can't really go below something that you may have. Now, you can pick that minimum. Now, the minimum temperature value, okay, is in terms of kelvins, it's around 273, okay, so it's in terms of negative, that's what we have. Now within that, okay, so your temperatures can take on different values. Now within those cities, you might specify for your data set, let's say, the temperatures that you will have are going to be less than 50. Again, this depends on where you are, okay, and let's say, greater than, let's say, minus 30. Now, okay, what are you measuring this in? Maybe I'm referring to degrees Celsius. If you're talking about degrees Fahrenheit or something, it might be different, or Kelvin, it might be different. But this, okay, how you are creating here a data set, okay, and your data values are within that particular set. So I hope that this gives you some kind of a sense on, okay, the differences between variables and then data values or data sets that you might take on. All right, so thanks for watching. We'll see you in a future video. Bye, everybody.